Hi, everybody. I am here today because I wanted to start this Autism Biomed Connect to connect other families in the community. So today I have my friend Courtney here, and Courtney and I met in a Facebook support group about 2.5 years ago. We both started our children on a similar protocol around the same time, and we've stayed in touch ever since. So Courtney, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old son who is autistic, and then we have 2 younger sons. We are just small town Southern family, and me and my husband have been married about 8 years. I have a bachelor's degree in education and middle school language arts and social studies, and taught only 2 years before becoming a stay-at-home mom. But during those years, I actually taught at a ABA centered school for autistic kids. And
it's kind of ironic that you had exposure to ABA and autism prior to having a son with a diagnosis. I'm sure that's helped you a little bit in your journey.
Yeah, and I think if I ever went back to that field, I would be better because of my experience on this side of it. And I don't know that I'll ever do that, though.
So what were some of the very first signs or symptoms after you had your son? What was his early infancy like, and when were you starting to get a little bit concerned about his developmental progress?
Sure. So my son, when he was born, well, a little bit of added background about where I was is I came from just your typical family, but we were a little extra on believing in doctors and medicine, and we were kind of that pill for everything family, and had a cabinet full of old prescriptions we didn't finish, and just kind of had something for every single ailment. And so I just kind of had this, if there's a problem, there's a pill that will fix it type mentality. And so and we also just had normal, really terrible standard American diets of pizza rolls and Doritos, and I was a super picky eater. So during my pregnancy, I was eating horribly and doing vaccines and I was on antibiotics for 8 weeks at the end of my pregnancy for a tooth infection. And like I said, I got my vaccines then. So when I had my son, that's the mentality I was in. So I actually switched pediatricians 5 times trying to find a pediatrician that would be what I called proactive enough to give him a pill for everything. Yeah. So I wanted antibiotics anytime that he had a congested nose or maybe tugging at his ear. I wanted them to do something to make him better every single time. So
really, Courtney, going back to your pregnancy, you had a healthy pregnancy. There was nothing concerning during pregnancy. Any health concerns? Okay.
No. Nope. I had a by-the-book pregnancy. Everything like on the books where it says, you'll probably get this symptom around this time. That's what happened. I was very fortunate to have a really smooth pregnancy.
And a vaginal delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to breastfeed?
No, I wasn't able to breastfeed, and we didn't have to. We did Pitocin and had an induced pregnancy or delivery because that's just what our doctor does. He does that at 39 weeks to everyone. So I've used him in my 2 other sons' births, and that's what he wanted me to do then too. So not knowing any better then, we did that. And so yeah. So my son, was getting antibiotics all the time because he always had some little head cold or something. So I was always pushing for that. He had a horrible time with all the formulas because I couldn't breastfeed. So he was on formula, and I would think that one wasn't working. So we went through all the formulas and ended up on a horribly
the sensitive, the everything, trying to find the right one for their stomach.
Yeah, and we ended up on Elecare, which is actually like barely even food. It's made for like feeding tubes and stuff. So we ended up on that. We ended up putting on some antacid stomach, like that kills the acid in your stomach, which isn't what he needed. But
Zantac?
Yeah, Zantac and Prilosec and Prevacid. was the one we ended up staying with for a while. So we did all those. He still, though, was developing really normally. Yeah, I'll read this again. This is pretty cool. So this is from like my journal that I kept like the first year of his life. I would just write every month like what he was doing and milestones. So I was looking at this other day and thought these were kind of just proof that he was developing normally, because I kind of started to like look back and be like, was I crazy? Did I miss something?
Right.
But, when I was looking at this, I was like, no, see, he was doing all these things. So this was when he was 7 months old. It says the other day you would say back or repeat to us the phrase, oh boy, when me and Dad would say it. You did this for like 3 or 4 times in a row. You have also said, hey, and you'll do that anytime you're excited to see us and we say hey first. You'll say hey back. You make so many consonant sounds like and ba and the th sound. You also say ah and yeah and I. And then there was one other one I thought was...
So at 7 months, he was already kind of developing some language.
Yeah, so he was making sounds and he was doing like this imitation. Like I can remember him looking at us and looking at our mouths really intently and trying to say them back. I have a voice recording and probably some videos too, I'm sure, of him, but I remember the recording specifically. I remember recording him saying, I good, which, you know, all babies do that, but it was like an imitation. Like I would say, I good, say I good, and then he would. So that was really early on, but this was 7 months. And then this one here at 8 months says you say when you're eating, because when I first started feeding you solids, I would model, say ah, and open your mouth. And then when I put the spoon in, I would say to get you to close your mouth so that you would swallow the food. So now anytime you see food, you say I said, you are so smart.
Dad. 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 Dad, dad, dad. Uh-oh.
Dad, dad, dad.
Where's dad, dad, dad? Where's dad, dad, dad?
Dad, 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 dad. Dad, 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 dad.
Where's dad, dad, dad?
But yeah, I mean, he totally was doing like small steps of imitating, and that seems like nothing, but the thing is that he lost that. And then we are in speech therapy trying to rebuild those skills of asking him to mimic just sounds, and then building up to getting him to mimic. Well, first you start by getting them to mimic movements, and then sounds, and then words, but still building that skill back up when he was 2 years old, when he was doing that.
Remember around what time you stopped hearing those things? Was it kind of like a slow regression, or you just woke up one day and he wasn't saying it anymore?
Yeah, I think ours was just a slow regression that was subtle, and I was pregnant with our second son around all the time this was happening, so I don't know that I was, and him being my first, I don't know that I was super aware of it until it was way far into it. He was about 18 months old when we just kept realizing that he wasn't meeting his goals at the pediatrician. You know, they do the whole little checklist thing.
Yeah.
And he wasn't meeting those at 12 months and at 15 months. So at 18 months, they had me put him in therapy. And just kind of precautionary thing. And then around the age of, when he was getting close to 2, I started asking the therapist questions about, you know, what is the root cause of this? Why is he delayed? Like, what's happening in his brain? Which is really naive questions because they don't know, and neither do the doctors.
It's just normal. It just happens to some kids, right?
Yeah, you have lots of people around you saying, well, my cousin, he didn't talk till he was 4. He'll talk when he's ready. Like, so.
I think it makes you feel better knowing that you had a cousin who didn't talk too. But really,
Yeah.
go anywhere.
Yeah, I know. So that, was kind of what I was hearing. So I really didn't think anything was wrong either. But when we went to the children's hospital, we traveled up there, and I had a newborn son that I left at home. And I just thought she was going to tell us that he was delayed and that it was fine and that he would catch up and, sorry that you wasted your day coming up here type thing. So after the 2-hour appointment, when she finally concluded by saying, well, this is hard, but he appears or presents to have autism spectrum disorder, and we'd like you to come back for some formalized testing, but I'm fairly certain that this is what he has. And I just kind of blanked out, and you just kind of don't hear the rest of the words that, she was saying after that. We're just kind of like blah, 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 blah. And, your whole world
Absolutely knocked out of you.
Yes, it was very difficult, very difficult. I remember going to eat afterwards, and I'm just like, I don't want to eat. I don't want to. Yeah, it was just so.
So with your experience working with autism prior to this, did that ever cross your mind as potentially a possibility? Was it ever a concern?
No, because I felt like our son was not the stereotypical, like what you would stereotype autism as a super withdrawn child. But he did become a little withdrawn around the age of 2, but I thought it was because I'd brought a newborn home and he was just mad about it, type thing. But I think
having to compare it to as your first child.
Yeah. It was hard. And it's funny because I feel like as first-time parents, you are watching you are so aware of everything going on with your child, but it is a little bit harder when you don't have like a baseline to really, you're just, it's just new to you and all of that. But yeah, it definitely seemed like he did have some words at his first birthday. I remember him having 3 words that he lost. But it wasn't like some stories you hear, and we know many people in our community, many that have the story of, no, my child was saying phrases and then was saying nothing, and it was a very like clear-cut situation.
Where they stopped walking, just like severe an onset of regression, which is so scary.
Yeah. So ours wasn't quite like that, but there definitely was regression, like signs that I can look back on and see of regression, and definitely a stop in development. You're developing on this nice trajectory, and then all of a sudden something is wrong, and you stop developing. So
I think you notice more of the signs of his delay after having your second child who is neurotypical and seeing him go through development. It's like, he wasn't doing this at this age.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
The same situation for me too.
And then our third son is even more neurotypical. So with our first son, he was fully vaccinated. And then our second son, I stopped vaccinating at a little bit before 1. And then our third son has had no vaccines. And just seeing the difference in development between them it's just crazy. It's kind of mind-blowing, the difference and the contrast in between the 3 of them, just with the different levels of toxic load that they each have carried. You can see a very clear effect of the toxic load versus in correlation to their development. It's really cool to watch, but also really, sad for our first son. But we had no idea what we were doing then.
Have you ever mentioned to any of his pediatricians that you felt like vaccines could be contributing to this, and that you are concerned about continuing on the vaccine schedule? And what was their response to that?
Yes. So our story with vaccines is that when our son was, I think, about 6 months old, I remember being in our house and sitting on our couch. I remember like the whole event really vividly, of seeing something on Facebook of all places. And we don't have in our town a lot of what do you call woke people? I don't know. I don't know what to call. Yeah, we don't have a lot of people like that, but I have one friend who is crunchy, and she posted something about vaccines and autism in the link, and I just started reading it really innocently and was really shaken by the families' stories that I was reading and their testimonies of what happened to their child after vaccines. I mean, these were the clear-cut cases of we went and got this vaccine, and then the next day our child was screaming with a massive fever and never came back. I read like 3 or 4 of those stories on that website, and so then I was texting my husband, and I was like, I don't know what to do, because I can't remember if it was that same day or the next day, we had a well visit that was going to be with vaccines. And I was like, I have no idea what to do. This is what I just read. And my husband is, he's kind of able to see all points of view. So he was very open to the possibility that it could be dangerous. So he was just like, he didn't know.
Prior to this, you guys had no idea that there could be a link between.
No, I don't think I'd ever even heard that, because when I saw that, I think I was like, oh my gosh, they have figured this out now. And this is the new gospel truth.
Moment.
Yeah. So I felt like everybody was finding this out for the first time. I didn't know there was always this theory of autism being caused by vaccines. So I decided, I prayed and just wore myself out worrying about it. But I went to that appointment and decided I would ask the doctor his opinion. So, and again, this is totally naive, but I didn't realize it was like this controversial thing. So I just came to him and told him what I had been reading and my concerns. And he told me that Andrew Wakefield, he's kind of the one known for bringing this to light, although I think there were a lot of others involved. But he said that when he was kicked out of England and lost his license and everything, there was like a write-up in one of the papers, and he had that, and just to show parents, to show that this was just a myth and it was poor research and, all these bad things he had to say about Andrew Wakefield. So
your concerns and convinced you that this is safe, this is effective, let's do this. Right.
Yeah. He said the vaccines were the best thing that had happened to modern medicine. They had saved, hundreds of lives. So I was convinced, but I'm sure there was always a hesitancy. I think I was convinced at that time, but I kept dealing with this hesitance inside of me.
Does any part of you ever wish you could go back to that doctor and share some of the things that you've learned since?
Yeah, I would love.
I'm open to it, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So then even after him, I asked the doctor that diagnosed our son with autism at the Children's Hospital, I asked her if she thought there was a link between. So that's why I say I think there was always this thought in my head that especially after our son was diagnosed, it was like, well, what if all that I read 6 months ago or a year ago or whenever it was is true? So then I remember asking another specialist that we saw, a neurologist that we saw, if he thought there was a link. And all of them would say, no, this has been thoroughly researched and disproven over and over and over again. So,
see that thorough research.
Yeah. Yeah. We're still waiting on that double-blind study. But.
Yeah. So after the diagnosis, what was your route from there? What was the first things that you guys started doing to help your son, or the first therapies or interventions that were geared towards autism?
So, of course, speech therapy and occupational therapy. And I poured myself into learning all I could about speech therapy. His therapist really appreciated my enthusiasm because I would take their training material home with me anytime they would I would ask them. I would ask them if they had anything that I could take home and read, and they would give me like their notes from seminars and their PowerPoint slides from seminars I'd went to, and training DVDs, lots of training DVDs. So I just poured myself into that because that's the only hope they gave you, was that, speech therapy. So we poured ourselves into that, and then also, we are of we are of Christian faith. So I was reading in the Bible, and I found this story in Mark chapter 9 that just I've really clung to that this whole journey. And I think even people who aren't of the Christian faith will find this encouraging. So in the story, it's about this dad who brings his sick son, who the Bible says has epilepsy, to first the disciples, which are Jesus's 12 best friends and students, and they were unable to heal him. And then Jesus comes on the scene, and the dad, brings his son to Jesus and tells him, your disciples couldn't help him. And Jesus starts like having this conversation. He's just like asking the dad questions and really being interested in his story. And in that conversation, the dad says that the illness that his son has throws his son into the fire and into the water, constantly trying to kill him. I remember that all resonating with me really deeply, because we know that our children, a lot of them have seizures. A lot of them have visible seizures that you can see, but a greater majority of them probably have these seizures in their brains that we maybe necessarily can't see with our visible eyes, but they have abnormal brain activity. Yes. So that resonated with me really deeply. And then the thought of the fire and the water, so many of our kids are dying from drowning every year, and other dangers that have to do with eloping and not understanding danger. So that really captivated me. And what happens next in the story is like one of my favorite. Well, the whole thing's my favorite. So then the dad says, Jesus, if you can help us, please have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus is like, hold up. What do you mean if? If I can? I'm God. If. And so the dad's like, and Jesus says, anything is possible if you believe. So he's like calling him out on his doubt. And the dad, in typical fashion, can we not relate to this? Like, we would do anything to help our kids. So you're saying all I have to do is believe? I believe, he says. He's like, I believe, Jesus. And then he does something super honest and vulnerable, and I love it. He says immediately, he's like, but help my unbelief. And I'm like, I think we all have that inside of us. Like, we get fired up and we're like, we can do this. We can heal our children. It's possible. There's always like this nagging doubt that you just can't shake. There's just this doubt of, what if not? So the dad's real honest about that. And even though Jesus just said, you have to have faith, he doesn't punish the dad for his doubt. Like, I think he knows that he's human and we're always going to have doubt. So he's like, I'm still going to do the miracle. So he tells the sickness to come out of the child, and the rest of the story is so cool. So he tells the sickness to come out of the child. And so we know, like, when Jesus says something like it's going to happen. But this is the first recorded, I may be wrong on this, there may be other older recordings of this, but I believe this is the first recording of a healing reaction, herxing, whatever you want to call it, die off, okay? So Jesus tells the sickness to come out of him, and instead, the boy has the worst seizure he's ever had in his life, and he is screaming and convulsing, and he stops moving and is lifeless on the ground. So when we're dealing with getting viruses out, toxins, heavy metals, parasites, yeast, bacteria, all those things, like, they're going to come out screaming, and they can often damage the body more as they're coming out, and it can look worse. Right. So love when science aligns.
An important point to make is that in the healing process, things usually do get worse before they get better, and that's usually the indication that you are healing. And
Absolutely.
I feel like a lot of parents get discouraged and give up in those times, when really those are the times to push through and be excited that they're having some kind of a reaction, because when you have no reaction, nothing.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's laying there and the crowd around him. So see if you can relate to this. The crowd around the dad is saying, he's dead. Your son's dead. And so to me, like, just speaks to my heart. I'm like, how many times do we have our communities around us saying, give up? You know, you've put forth your best effort, accept it. He's gone, or you've made him worse.
They are. And it's not that you don't love them the way they are. It's just that you want better for them.
Yeah. So this poor dad, I can't imagine his heart. He just gave his child to Jesus. Jesus said he was going to heal him. Now he looks like he's dead. So he has to be thinking, what have I done? What is there any point? So then Jesus goes over. He leaves a nice little dramatic pause there for a little bit. He goes over and he gets the boy by the hand. And based on the story and the language that the dad uses, I'm going to assume this was a young man or an older child. So he gets the young man and he stands up to his feet and he's talking. And so, imagine that day, for that parents. And so then later on, the disciples are like, Jesus, what gives? Why couldn't we heal this guy? We've healed like lots of other people for you. And he's like, well, this kind can only come out with prayer. So what I clung to and what I've read this story over and over throughout anytime I get discouraged. And the little nuggets that I've pulled from it is, even though you may not be able to see it with your eye, that doesn't mean that God hasn't already granted your prayer request. Doesn't mean that the miracle hasn't already been written into your story or spoken into existence. You just can't see it yet. And you have to persevere beyond what your eyes see and what the people around you are telling you. And that can be really difficult to do without some strong faith and belief in the impossible. And then I took from it prayer. So I was already praying for my son, but there was a season right around the time that I discovered this story and before Biomed, where I prayed for my son more than I have in any other season. So every night we would, or sometimes my husband would come with me after our son would go to sleep, we would go and just hold his hand and I would just bawl and cry and pray. And I would do that night after night. And I didn't miss a night for like a year straight. And so we did that for quite a while. And, I still pray for him, but I'm just saying during that season, it was literally that and speech therapy. That's all we had. So
the first little glimmer of hope that you felt God is answering my prayers, what was kind of the first indication of something happening?
Well, probably 6 to 9 months into that first appointment where we found out that he had autism. I have no idea how I even found this. I don't know what I was looking at, but I found online this TED Talk, and it was this doctor in Florida, Dr. Miranda, and he's a neurologist who specializes in autism, and he did a specialized EEG type test, which is like, they put the electrodes all over you and kind of read your brain activity. But he did a more sophisticated test. So I called them and what he said was really good on the video. He said, this is a brain-based disorder, so why are we not looking at the brain?
Right.
You wouldn't diagnose someone with congested heart failure and not look at their heart activity. So let's look at the brain and see what's happening. So we had to come up with a lot of money to go down and see him. And we did that. And in retrospect, he was a mainstream doctor. Like he told me vaccines were not the cause. And he still used prescriptions and all that. So he's a mainstream doctor, but he was out of the box thinker. So he did his test, and then he ordered a 24-hour EEG back in our hometown, and then that we could do back there. He ordered it, and then we did it back there. And then he did. He gave us a prescription for namenda, which is an off-label use of an Alzheimer's drug or dementia medication. And so that was kind of the first glimmer of hope, as we found someone who was telling us that this was treatable. And he gave us that medicine. And still to this day, I don't know anyone that has responded as well to this medicine as our son did.
I wonder if Dr. Miranda had mentioned that he thinks kids can recover from this, that he's seen kids recover from using namenda, or that autism recovery is a possibility.
Yeah. So he did. He made some bold claims about namenda, which I don't think are true because I've talked to other parents who use it that didn't have this great of a response, but he gave us a lot of hope. And he actually told me that our son wasn't autistic. So that was kind of crazy because we'd just been told by 3 other specialists that he was. And he actually said, I don't think he's autistic. I think he's severely delayed in speech, but he was socially interactive. He was never totally withdrawn. And so he interacted well with the doctor. He played like peekaboo games and high five games and stuff. So he's like, no, I don't think he's autistic. So I took that with a grain of salt. I mean, I didn't know what to think.
Reassuring that someone else thought your child was seemed typical developing, or at least gave you like a glimmer of hope.
I know. Because getting all those testing reports back and them pointing out all of his weaknesses that I wasn't even aware of, I was like, it was really disheartening. So having someone who believed in him was pretty huge. And so the namenda, within the first week of using it, my nonverbal child went to saying his first word. And then the second week, he had another word. And the third week, he had like 2 more words. So we were building a bit of a vocabulary, and all of his words were just nouns. He was just labeling, like his first word was cow and fish and train. So those are the first 3 that I can remember.
Words too. Usually you hear like mama or dad.
Yeah, no, I skipped all the names. So, and those, another thing that I didn't mention is I tried Gemini speech videos. So all those were words he had seen on his videos. And a little bit about those is that Gemini speech videos is like a discrete video modeling thing. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of extra speech therapy, and it just will show someone saying like cow with a picture, and then it'll show like a close-up of their mouth and them saying it slowly so they can, to help with like apraxia, and then it'll show another generalized picture with just cows as they're saying it. And so it does all these different things with this one word, different views, and it's really neat. And so we still use that.
Watching them, was it easy to get him to sit down and attend to it?
Yeah, not completely easy at first, but not too bad because he was very visual. So he liked cartoons and he loved little Einstein's cartoons and watched them. So he was resistant, but I just did it in his high chair because at this time he's only 2 and 3. So I put him in the high chair, and then while he was eating, I would have my laptop opened up in front of him and have it playing. So I just turned everything else off, and he had no other distractions, and he was locked into his chair. And so he didn't really have a choice. I mean, So I remember him fussing a lot like the first time or 2, but he really took to it probably easier maybe than some kids. And then he got to where he just expected that with meals. And other thing we've done, another tip, if you try something like this, is you can get these devices that hold your iPad on the back of your headrest in your car.
Oh,
so we got so we got like this thing that's strapped to the back of our car. So it holds on the back of my seat. So then it's right in front of our son. So he's got his iPad, and they have an app where they can watch their videos through an app. So I just put those on in the iPad when we were driving, because we live kind of far in a rural community. So we have a lot of commute time. So that was a way to
making good use of your time during those downtimes to try to still initiate speech or learning opportunity. I would have never thought to do that. So that's really cool.
So I did it those 2 ways, meal times and then in the car. And then he honestly grew to love it so much, but he's a scripter. So he grew to love it so much that he watches it all the time by himself now. He has free access to it on his iPad. So he just picks it up and turns it on, and he loves it now, and he always has. He's always really liked it and taken to it well. So we did that. So we went to see Dr. Miranda. We had prayer. We had Gemini videos.
And you didn't share the results of his EEG.
Okay, so his EEG, we went and done that in a nearby city, and we stayed for 48 hours. And they told us after, because their doctors would be overseeing it since it was an admission to the hospital. So we had to see their doctors, even though we had the order. And so they would come in, they came in like the next morning and after the first 24 hours, and they said, you guys can go home because this first 24 hours, there was no significant findings. So you don't need to stay for the next 24 hours. And I went ahead and just said, no, we would like to go ahead and stay to increase any chance of finding something. So he was okay with that. And then the next morning he came back and he said there still was nothing. So we had scheduled a follow-up with their doctor to go over the results. And then also once Dr. Miranda would get the results, we would follow up with him. But since there was no significant finding, they told us that we didn't need to come back for our follow-up with them. So I didn't hear anything else about the results or that test until months later when Dr. Miranda finally, because you have to sign like a release and he has to get it and have, so by the time we had that appointment with him, it had been like 2 or 3 months. And he called me and he was like, I totally agree with their findings. And so I think we're going to start him on Keppra. And he started telling me about this medicine. And I'm like, whoa, back up.
Findings. You told me there were no findings. Everything was normal.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm sorry, you've completely lost me. They told me that his results were completely insignificant and there was nothing abnormal in his results. And he was just kind of perplexed. And he's like, well, I'm going to send you their written report and then we can talk about this again. So he sent that to me and he, circled the areas of significance. I mean, it was a long, lengthy report filled with records, and they're discussing his abnormal brain activity, and they used words like epilepsy in the report. So I was like just dumbfounded. And so when I asked them at that hospital why they had, in my eyes, lied to me and been dishonest, they said that they did not think that that abnormal activity was significant enough to warrant treatment. And I'm like, yeah, but still I should know.
You have a child that has a neurological brain or abnormality and they're not considering that this.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Is that not crazy? You got a child who cannot talk, who at this point is 3 years old and has very little speech.
The clinical presentation should come into play at some point too,
yeah.
Even if you're not agreeing with the findings on the lab work or.
Right. And I was having him test. I mean, I was telling them he was having these staring spells and he was having these hyperventilation experiences where he would like get like this. It was when he would watch cartoons. There were certain triggers on the cartoons that would cause him to like hyperventilate. So there was these things that I just, wondered if they were anything. So we have all that going on. We've got a child who's not developing, but these abnormal brain waves have nothing to do with it. Right. And so it was just, and Dr. Miranda, he was like, I do see this sometimes. He's like, I'm not really sure why some doctors think this is non-significant in a child who is presenting as your son is. And he said, this is definitely important and significant. So we did the Keppra. We've done that for years. We stopped a little bit into our Biomed journey. We finally stopped it. And I never saw a difference with the Keppra. We were really hopeful that we would. And I've talked to a neurologist since then, and he told me that he actually would have put our son on medicine also. And this is just the mainstream, just at a different hospital. He's like, no, I would have put him on medicine. I wouldn't have considered that insignificant. He said, but I would have chosen a different medicine than what Dr. Miranda did. So I still think that may be something we revisit in the future to retest and see about trying a different one and just see what happens. But
would you ever try CBD for seizure activity to see if it would help reduce any symptoms?
Yeah, we have done CBD, and it's not a big game changer with us. So we went on and off of it many times over the last couple of years. I didn't do it back then, but once we got into Biomed, we definitely have been on several different forms of it.
You
since
still
then.
feel like you see the signs of possible seizure activity?
I mean, he still has those staring off moments. It's hard to say what that is. But definitely, I mean, it could be. It for sure could be. And yeah, I plan on going back pretty soon, hopefully within a year, to revisit that. I think it is an important piece. So, yeah.
So then from there, what kinds of interventions did you guys try? You started the Gemini, the speech therapy. You went in for the EEG. You started the namenda, which you were seeing good gains, then the Keppra. And then where did you go from there?
Yeah. So where we were at this point was with his skills is he was able to label some objects, but it was like heavily had to be prompted, or he was just
age at this point.
So by the time we got the seizure diagnosis, so right around that point we were 3. So that was probably like a few months after his 3rd birthday.
Okay.
So he is able to say maybe 10 words. I mean, he had said, this was the weird thing about his progression, is he would get some words and then it would seem like he would lose those. Like you may hear him say cow and fish, and you may hear him say it, just loop it, like just cow, 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 like 50 times a day. And you may be able to show him a cow and prompt him enough to get him to say back to you cow, but it had to be prompted like that. But mostly he would just kind of loop it, or if he's seen one, he would say, cow or shark. Shark was another, which is a hard one to say, but that was another one that he really liked. But it was like, then you would notice, okay, he's saying shark and car now, but I haven't heard train and cow in months, and I can't get him to like prompt him enough to get him to say that. So it was kind of like building up 5 words, then lose some of those and get 5 new ones. And it was kind of like this cycle.
And like 5 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah, it literally was. It started getting like, at first, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle drug. Like, wow. But then it was like, yeah, this is really helping him. And so we're certainly better off than we were, but we're not building an actual vocabulary like we had hoped. So that's where we were, and, still doing the prayer thing, speech therapy. And then my husband, he just works in like a factory, blue collar type job. And he actually builds and assembles bridges and stuff. So one of his coworkers, so just a plain blue collar, good old boy Southern guy, sends him a link to this video of this child that was recovered from autism. And so he sent it to my husband, and of course he sent it to me. And that child looked exactly like my child as far as the behaviors. Like, it was so weird.
The video.
So that video is someone we're all very familiar with, I think, in our community, is Scott Shoemaker. And his video has really, I think, has inspired a lot of people to seek answers.
It was the one that inspired us too, which ultimately led to us connecting in the chelation.
I know. So it's crazy the effect that his story has had. So I saw that child doing all the things that my child does, the spinning, the not responding to the name, the inability to answer questions or talk. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he looks so much like our kid. And then you watch his video and you see the progression of him talking and then answering questions and then being conversational. And I'm like, my mind was just like blown, because I was like, I can't believe there's help and hope for this. So that video, Scott's main healing protocol was chelation. And I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even know how to say the word for a long time. I was saying it completely wrong.
Chelation.
Yeah. I had no idea what that meant, but I started researching that, and I actually reached out. There's a Gemini Facebook group for like people who use Gemini. So I like posted on there, which isn't really a biomed community at all. It's kind of a mix. And I posted on there. I'm like, hey, has anyone ever heard of chelation? I had no idea that was controversial, or that it was not, known or whatever. So, but I got tons of comments of people saying, yeah, they had, and they had good results, or maybe neutral results. And one girl in particular, she's like, yeah, I used the ACC protocol. Here's a link to the Facebook group. And I'm like, okay. So I kind of started researching that specific protocol. And I'm kind of glad I did. I do think it is a really good protocol. So it's a little bit different. I know you've done videos on this for anyone interested on how to do it, but you have to do...
He stands for what?
Andy Cutler chelation. And so Andy Cutler's protocol is to give the chelator, which is ALA, every 3 hours. You can add in other chelators as well, but his main one was the ALA. And you would give that every 3 hours. And ALA is just an antioxidant. You can buy that about anywhere. What is it?
Over the counter, not a prescription.
Yes, over the counter supplement. So we give that every 3 hours, even through the night. Through the night, you can do 4 hours. But we did that. And so the test that he recommended was a hair follicle test. And our sons came back with really high aluminum, but it did not show mercury, which was kind of what Andy Cutler thought was the bigger problem.
Right.
So we decided then, because the test isn't foolproof, no test is, but this testing for heavy metals can be tricky because they can seep into organs and tissues and bones and everywhere. They can kind of settle in. So when you're taking blood or hair, you're measuring what has excreted through your cells into your hair. And same with like blood, you're looking for what's free flowing still in the body. So it can be difficult to actually see that on a test if it's a past exposure.
Right. I feel like kids with autism, a lot of them have problems with detoxification or their methylation cycle. So a lot of times all these toxins are being stored, like you mentioned, in the organ, not coming out with things like urine and hair test.
Exactly.
Using.
Yes. So what Andy recommended, which is very smart, is to just try the protocol for 5 to 10 weeks. So the protocol is on just weekends. You do that every 3 hours. So you do that like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, you don't have to do it those days, but 3 days a week. And then you take the rest of the week off and then you do it again. So that weekend that you do it, the 3 days, is a round, called a round. So we did, he recommended you do 5 rounds, maybe 10. And if you're seeing negative results, like we kind of touched on earlier, that still means that it's stirring something up, because a person that has no issues should be able to take that ALA every 3 hours and not see anything positive or negative. So if you see, your kid getting really irritable or tired or whatever, that means it's pulling something. So we saw a little bit of that in the first round. We saw him being really tired and grouchy. And there's support supplements, and I'm sure you have videos that go into all that. So I won't go into all that, but there's support supplements that you're giving to help the body through all that.
That one's black. Can you say black? Black. You almost got it. Black. You did the black. Is that one red? What color is that? Can you say red? There's blue. What color is that one? What color is that one? And that one is brown. You're all done. Good job. Don't like. Can you show me which one? Can you show me which one's pink? Oh, you don't want to? Hey, it's okay. You're super smart and did a really great job. You show me. Look, this is pink. You don't want to. You do know your colors, don't you? You just don't like to do this. You do not like to pick. Can you show me pink? That's pink. That's pink.
Round 3. So baseline again is, just a few words, really heavily prompted, just labeling or just looping, saying the same word over and over. So that's where we're at. And I took a video because Scott inspired me to document this through videos. So almost every round my goal was to after every round do a video update of where he was. or at least every other round. So I just remember round 3, I wasn't seeing any positive gains, but I was still seeing a little bit of irritability. And I remember he was super grouchy, and I was like, I've got to do my video. I haven't done it for this round. So I sit him in his high chair, and because he's 4 when we start this. So we found out about ACC in June of 2017, and we started about a month later. So I sat him in.
We started July.
Yes. Yeah, it was sometime in July when we actually ended up starting, right around the middle of July, I think.
There's a group of us that kind of all started around the same time, and I feel like most of us still stay in touch, which is cool.
Yes, it is. And that's something too that as a really good topic is that, you know, when we started this, I think I speak for all of us, like you kind of become obsessed with researching and reading and joining all the groups and talking to as many people as that will talk to you that have done these things. And you just kind of become consumed with that. And that's normal. And it's exhausting, but you're trying to take in, I mean, you just found out that there might be help for your kids. So you're just like, okay, how? And there's so many different things out there that it would take you forever to sit down and like read about all of them.
Done, and it still isn't.
No, it's never done. It's never done. But those first like few months, it's like you eat, breathe, and sleep through like Biomed, or you don't sleep. Yeah, you don't sleep very much. So we were, I was in that really deep, and that can become like, I think, super isolating. That's really difficult, especially if you're in a community like ours that is not, you know, talking or aware of any of this. So I've struggled a lot there at the beginning with just feeling like, it's like you're almost living this double life of this is what I read and like this is all I'm putting into myself is all this information about this stuff, but I can't talk to any of you that are actually in my daily life about it because you'll think I'm nuts and you just kind of look at me funny when I try.
When my son was in speech therapy and I had learned about the namenda protocol and we started giving him the cod liver oil, and he was like improving a lot with his speech therapy, and she mentioned it to me, and in my mind I was thinking like, well, we've been using fish oil, but she was going to think I was crazy. So it is like you're keeping a secret from the whole world because people aren't open to these things, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. So it can be very lonely. And so, I mean, that's where our communities are great. And I don't think that it fully satisfies the longing to have, you know, community around you physically, but it's something, and it's better than nothing. And I feel like, you know, my best friends are people that I've never actually met in person because they know far more about my life and my belief system and how I think and have more similar lives to me than anyone that I actually do life with. Right. So that can be really tricky to work out, and how I choose to handle it now is a case-by-case basis. You know, I kind of fill people out and I kind of determine how much I trust them with being vulnerable about this stuff. But there are a few here lately that I've been talking to more. I think I'm open in general. Like people know the things that I've done. I'll post some things on Facebook about it. I'm not as open as some people.
But waters and see how people respond, and then you'll share a little bit more.
It's so hard. I don't think I have it figured out. I think that I just kind of daily discernment of what I feel like is the best in that moment. But I mean, I don't feel like we've had anyone to our face be mean or rude to us. But I wouldn't say that we've had anyone be like super encouraging about it. It's kind of neutral.
Like smile and nod, but don't really engage with you about it or ask questions.
Yeah. That's pretty much how that usually goes. And, you know, and then I've met a few autism moms that are in our community, in my local community, and they will ask me some questions. And this is a funny thing looking back on it, because you're so on fire for recovery when you first get into this mode. It's like you're in this research mode, you're in this warrior mom mode. And so anyone that would come to me as an autism mom and ask advice, I had one mom ask me about, they had heard about MTHFR being related to autism. And I'm like, oh, okay, here's 15 links to articles you can read, and here's some research papers, and here's some videos, and here's some Facebook groups, and here's
forget it, never mind.
Exactly. I'm like, I think I overwhelmed. I came on a little strong there at the beginning, but I just thought that's what I would have wanted someone to do. So why wouldn't? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I would. I don't know how I would have responded if someone would have done that to me before I realized.
I used to think people that used essential oils were crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I admit I was totally judgmental, like, oh, those hippies. And now I'm like, give me all the essential oils.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I came from like just pharmaceuticals and you do what the doctor, so yeah, this was quite a switch for me. So I understand people's reservations about this. I understand it. And that makes it even more frustrating is it's like, I understand where you're coming from. And I think what I've come to the conclusion of is you really just can't save everyone. I can't save all the autistic kids. I can't enlighten all the autism moms in my community. And I really had to
blame yourself trying if you really do. If you try to convince people, I've kind of learned I have to sprinkle or plant the seeds. And if they come to me asking, then I'll open myself up to them. But if they don't, move on. Don't
exactly
try and pour all your energy into helping others because you will just completely drain yourself.
Because what the thing is there are people who will be receptive. And so
and there's not enough resources for those people. So save your energy for those people.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. It's kind of like pouring your energy into a cup with holes in the bottom, with people who just, some people just, they're just in one ear and not the other. And they just kind of write you off as crazy or, that's too hard or too complicated. I mean, I remember, bless this girl's soul, I overwhelmed her to the max. I gave her all of Andy Cutler's books to go home and read.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Because she came to me and asked.
Fight Autism and Win.
Yeah, I remember that one too. I got her Fight Autism and Win, which is short. It's, a nice, simple read. And then I gave her his 2 books that are like this thick with no words in it that you can pronounce. And
chemistry.
I don't think she read any of it. I don't necessarily blame her, but anyway.
The quiz at the end of this, I want to ensure you read it.
Yeah. So then I learned that, okay, not everyone is going to be super receptive. So yes, save that energy, pour it into your child. And if people come and ask questions along the way, as they see what you're doing with your child, then by all means, pursue helping them. So, so we're at round 3. I put him in the high chair and I got out these figurine sets. So they come in a crown, this like cardboard hollowed out crown, like big. And then there's all these little figurines with that same color. So if it's a pink crown, all the figurines, like there'll be a little pink heart, pink flowers, pink pig, all things pink inside of it. And same thing with blue and brown and, so on. So I had used this activity with him before and was able to heavily prompt him to say some of the words that I knew that he could say. But this time, I was just like getting out because I wanted to show, I knew he wasn't going to say any of it, but I wanted to show I'm holding these up and he's not saying any of them. And then later on, when he gets better, hopefully I'll have a video to contrast that and show that now he is able to say 10 of these or half of them or whatever. So that was my point. And it was like discouraging that day because I was like, oh, he was so mad. I just remember him like screaming at the beginning of the video because he was mad that I put him in the high chair. And I'm like, this is going to be awful, but I wanted to be authentic with our journey and not just show like the high points. I wanted to show this is where he's at, even though we're 3 rounds in, this is where he's still at. So I get these figurines out and I'm holding one up and I'm like, what is this? And he says, backpack. And I was like, what did you just say?
Beautiful word.
Like, you never said that before. Like, where did that come from? So I get out another one and he's like, bear. And I'm like, what? I mean, I throughout the whole video, he probably named.
Like, am I dreaming? Pinch me? Like, what's happening? Yeah.
I totally was. It was probably like 20 or 30 items on that video that I was videoing it of him labeling all these objects. And I was whispering, like you can hear me in the video saying, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like, I think I even told him at one point, I was like, you are blowing mommy's mind right now. Like, I've never heard him talk like that. It was, I mean, I don't know. That was an awesome moment that I so much joy and just amazement.
I haven't found it yet, baby. What are those? What is that? Is that flowers?
Flower.
Yeah.
Flower.
What's this one?
Heart.
A heart. Oh my gosh. What's this one?
Pink.
It's pink. Donut. Is that a donut?
Don't.
Good job. It says flowers.
Flower.
Good job.
Flower.
You want to clean them up? Oh, there's no more. I don't know where the ice cream went. We lost it. I'm sorry. We'll look for it more. I thought I'd come across it by now. You want green or yellow?
Green.
Green.
Green. Green.
Green, please. Good job. What is that?
Frog.
Frog. What is this?
Tree.
A tree. Oh my gosh. I can't even believe this right now, Noah.
Tree.
A tree.
Tree. Tree.
Do you know what this is?
Grapes.
Grapes. Grapes. What's this?
But.
A bug. Do you know what this is?
Weed.
Vine.
Weed.
Vine. You know what this is? Celery.
Sorry.
Great job, buddy. High fives? He's like, busy. You're blowing Mama's mind right now. I can't believe you're saying all these. Can you get, what color is this one? Purple. Good job. Yay, Noah. What color is this one?
Blue.
Blue. Good job. What color is this one?
Green.
Green. This one green. What color is this one? What color?
Red.
Red. Good job. What color is this one?
Orange.
Orange. Good job. I don't know if you know these. What color is this one? Brown.
Wow.
Good job. What color is this one?
Wow.
White.
Wow.
Say it with me. Say white.
Wow.
White. Can you say I love you? I love you.
I want you.
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 I love you.
Yeah.
Yay! Mwah. Good job.
And so I was like, okay,
ATC is working after all.
it is working. And which was great, but it can like build your expectations to an unhealthy level of, okay, if this is round 3, then we're going to do the 30 or 40 rounds and he's going to be all better, which wasn't the case with us. We did 35 rounds total. I think they want you to do what, like 200?
I think 200 is the minimum that Andy recommends, and that would be 4 years.
Yeah.
That's not right. I think it's 100 then. Wasn't it 2 years?
Maybe. I don't remember. It was a lot. Yeah, at least 2 years, I feel like.
We did around the same. We did between 35 and 40 rounds.
Yeah. So we did 35 rounds, but from probably about round 10 to 35, I don't think we've seen anything negative or positive. I would raise the dose because you start really low. I would raise that dose higher than most adults were doing on the protocol because there are adults that do it too. And it was nothing.
You're going to get a reaction out of him. I'm going to give him the whole bottle.
Yeah, I was like, I just wanted to know. So as we got closer to that 35, I did a 13-day round one time with a pretty high dose. So we stopped seeing anything with it. And so at that time, that would have been right around the time that we finally got a MAPS doctor. And, you know, he assured me that I probably had gotten what I was going to get out of the protocol. And so we kind of moved on to some other things at that point. And I will say, like, kind of as another, like, piece of advice to people, when you start getting into these communities, some of them can be very like
biased,
just pushy with their protocol and just want, you know, you to follow their protocol. And if it's not working, then it's your fault. And all
if
that
you follow it, we're going to kick you out of the group. Like, you're not welcome here.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can be like, yeah, it can be hard. And so in my head, I just kept thinking, you know, I must not be doing something right when he started doing bad or not doing anything with the protocol. So getting a doctor that would kind of open my mind to other things was very helpful. And then getting into other communities, you know, joining other groups, looking into other protocols, like all of that is allowed. It's called free thinking and thinking for yourself. And that is what we need to do as parents, because following after just what doctors say is most likely what got our kids in trouble to begin with. So it's not healthy to fall back into that just because you're using different theology or way of thinking. Doesn't mean that every protocol that worked for somebody is going to work for your kid. And it doesn't mean that there's only one good MAPS doctor out there. And it doesn't mean that even if you have the best one that has the best recovery rate, that you have to do everything they say by the letter. Like, I think that is really hard as a parent, because you just want someone to help you fix it, and you can just kind of become their puppet. And that's just not healthy, because the thing is we know our kids better than anyone, and we are very in tune with them, and we know what's working and what's helping and what's normal for them. And
so you were doing the ACC, the anti-color chelation, and then you started working with the MAPS doctor, and you explained to him that you just felt like it wasn't working anymore. And what was his response, and what kind of where did he kind of guide you from there?
So so we did some testing at that point, not a lot. We did the oats test. We did a food sensitivity test. And so then we started doing the gluten-free diet, and then slowly progressed to a mostly casein-free or dairy-free diet. He helped us do a gut reset protocol, which we had addressed yeast some at that point, but maybe not as comprehensively, because again, we were just following Andy Cutler's suggestions. And so we did his suggestions for yeast. And really, I was taking everything he said as gospel truth, and that was the only way, especially when you seen that your kid was doing good on following his advice there at first. So, but when things slowed down with ACC, I, thankfully was able to open up to trying new things. So we did that protocol, that gut reset protocol that helps a lot with the stimming that we see in our kids and stuff. A lot of that is just gut dysbiosis with yeast. And I don't know, I think we
or see any like negative responses from the gut reset? Like, what were your challenges?
I don't think the gut reset didn't have much. Now, right before we did the gut reset on our own, we did Humaworm, which is like a parasite cleanse. That was horrible.
I heard that tastes awful.
Oh, it does. It was horrible. And it was so hard on him. Because the ingredients in that, the herbs in that are killing the parasite are also going to stir up anything that you have going on in your gut, yeast and bacteria and all of that. So, Lord, he was crazy on that. He was bouncing off the walls. It was crazy. So,
because of his behavior, you still continued the whole course?
We did it all. we got out of it alive, barely. And then, and it's long. Actually, I think it's 40 days, 40 or 41. So it was really long and it was really awful. The gut reset wasn't that bad. I think it's a gentler approach because you're kind of baby stepping up and you're adding things in slowly and doing things at slow rates. So it wasn't too bad. And we also, at that point, became conscientious of our sugar intake. So we were cutting back on sugar. I never was able to go completely sugar-free, but I was cutting back. But at this time, his diet was still not good. I mean, I thought I was doing good at that point. Well, I think I knew I wasn't doing great because I knew like processed foods weren't good. I think I lived in denial for a long time about diet because my diet was so terrible growing up that I just...
You're like, I'm healthy, I'm normal, it must be fine.
Exactly. I remember my... one of my best Biomed friends and mentors, really, me and her, I would argue with her. She was so patient with me. She'd listen to my ridiculous arguments about like gluten. I'm like, it's always been in food. So autism's pretty new. So, just like these ridiculous arguments. And she's like, actually, it's not always been the same type of
pesticides that it's so
yeah. So she was patient and just kind of let me do that on my own and stuff. But or come to that.
You mentioned a mentor. How did you find? Was this through Taka?
No, but I do think that they offer that. Maybe
they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you can get on your like state legislator. You can get on like your state chapter of Taka and find that. Is that how that works?
I think so. I've never personally done it, but I know that it is a service that's available, which is cool for the families that feel totally lost. Having someone to kind of hold your hand through it, just walk through it, it's helpful. And I know your mentor has helped you so much. You would talk about her all the time and the things that she was sharing with you. So that's
yeah, she's been a huge help. I mean, doctors are a big help, but she's someone that you can talk to more frequently and just get to know. And yeah, that's been a huge help. I just kind of just lucked onto her. God bless me with her, and bless her little heart for putting up with me for all this time. God love her soul.
Hope she sees this so she knows how much she's appreciated.
Yes. So yeah, she's held my hand through a lot of this, and that is something that I think, we're kind of shy about reaching out to, but worst they can do is say no. And I never ask her specifically to be my mentor. I think she just kind of reached out to me, and I've had people do that before her. I've had people reach out and say, hey, I saw your comment, and I just wanted to give you more information on this. And that's a good opportunity just to establish the relationship. I think it works best when you have an organic connection with them and, you just kind of click.
You did the gut reset with your doctor, and then what were kind of your next steps after that?
So with this doctor, we were able to do the gut reset. We started doing B12 shots, which we actually didn't really see anything from. And then we added the folinic into the shots. I don't know. There may have been it was subtle. If there was anything, it was subtle. And which is disappointing because everyone hopes that, the B12 shots are going to work. And for a lot of people, they do huge things. So that was kind of disappointing.
Did you do genetic testing prior to starting the B12 shot?
I don't think prior. I think it was actually after, I think. We have done maximized genetics testing for the SNPs or SNPs. And he has a lot of gene mutations that deal with methylation and similar cycles. So that's why it makes sense to always give B12 a shot. Or
literally,
yeah. And just a word of advice on how to do those. So how we did it, and I've had friends that I've told this and they still chose to do it a different way. But for us, we did it when he was asleep. We used EMLA cream. They can give you a numbing cream. It's EMLA. And if they don't want to give that to you, you can buy one on Amazon called
Is that like lidocaine?
Yeah. It's a mix of a couple different types of anesthetics. Or you can buy on Amazon if your doctor just doesn't want you to have that. There is some that are they don't really need it. They're not going to feel it. So if they give you any pushback on it, you can buy, or if you run out, I've done that before. I ran out. I bought LMX on Amazon. It's similar. It's maybe not quite as strong. So you want to put that on their bottom, and you can cover that with saran wrap and let that set for, I think, about a half hour. And so I would wait till he was asleep for probably about an hour to get him in a deeper sleep. And then we would do the EMLA, and then we would do the shot, and he most of the time slept through it. If he woke up, it was just kind of whined and then went back to sleep. So that's just a little tip on how we did it without having all the needle drama of them kicking and screaming. And I don't think he was ever aware of the fact that he had shots. So we did those. We later into working with this doctor, we actually did the FRAT test, the FRAT test. And he actually, his was normal. His results were normal. But before we did the test, I was giving him a trial with superfolate drops. So you have to do a lot more of them than what you would use. What?
That's what we use, the Designs for Health.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So we were giving really high doses of that to try to compete with, Becky, how do you say the prescription?
Oh, leucovorin.
Yeah, leucovorin.
Right. If I said it wrong, I'm just going to voice over.
Have to Google that later.
Yeah.
So we did the superfolate drops to try to mimic leucovorin, which is a prescription that you can get if you do the FRAT test, and it shows that they have a need for that. So we did that, and I don't know, I felt like, again, it was just maybe a subtle thing, but we kept up with that for a while. Then we were doing things on our own, probably while working with the MAPS doctor, and before, we've done, I'll just mention some of the ones that we've tried. We've done Kelly Dorfman protocol. I love that one. I did see a clarity with using the phosphocholine. And we've done some really heavy work in immune modulation, both with and without doctor supervision. We've done some things with that. That brought about a huge amount of receptive speech. So receptive speech meaning his ability to understand what is being said. So he's being receptive to the language. So he was able to start following commands, and it also helps because he had some language at that point, so it helped him be able to understand what we were asking. Right. And understand our prompts better. So it did help a little bit with the expressive speech, but mainly just seeing a huge difference and shift in his ability to understand what we were saying. And I think that that's super important to look at is the immune system. Most of our kids are doing, I mean, as bad as a lot of their guts are, I'd say their immune systems, I mean, chicken or the egg, which comes first, I don't know, but they're so...
The immune system kind of are one and the same.
Tied together. Yeah, they're tied together and they're communicating together. So if you have a dysregulated immune system, then you're going to keep having yeast. And that's the thing, like when you first get into this, or at least for us, we kept fighting yeast with one thing. Then we would switch to something else, and you're just constantly fighting yeast all the time. And then at some point, I think this is where I'm at now, is it's like, okay, but hold up. I feel like we're just band-aiding this. I feel like this is still just a band-aid. Why can he not maintain a yeast-free GI tract like the rest of us? Like we are giving him, which we did nystatin with a doctor. We've done the gut reset protocol, which was all herbal and diet and stuff. I mean, we've done all these things and it just keeps coming back. So that's where I think, building that immune system so that it can fight the bacteria and things itself is important. And really, since then, we don't have to fight yeast near as much as what we were. So his recent gut test, stool test, was not showing as much dysbiosis as his first one, that's for sure. His first one was a mess.
You go up on his first one?
His first stool test was a mess. I mean, like every yeast marker was like maxed out. It was really low in good bacteria and high in all the bad stuff. His was a pretty mess, which was surprising surprising in that he was not struggling with diarrhea or constipation or anything like that, but he was really stimmy and laughed a lot. We've done lots of CBD. We did Enhancer, which is like a turmeric. It's a really good one. It's really high quality, nice one. But we didn't see a whole lot with that. So we've done quite a few things on our own and things with doctors. That's kind of where it leads up to where we're at now. Let me say, I did all that stuff, and then I had my third son. And when I had my third son, by this point, I'm exhausted with all the research. And, it's a roller coaster, just kind of like that story that I was talking about from the Bible. It's like hopes up, found someone that can maybe help me. Now they, didn't help as much as I hoped. And, you're just on this roller coaster of constantly getting your hopes up, and then being disappointed, and then trying to muster up some more faith. And you're on this roller coaster, and it can get exhausting, especially if you're not taking care of yourself and your relationships around you, which, as we've already talked about, is really tricky to work on your relationships around you, because it's hard to be close with people that you can't be totally transparent with. So it is a tricky balance. So at this point, I got burnout. And I took a step back from our communities. I kind of quit reading on the groups for hours a day.
You was just at a point where you didn't believe that recovery could happen, or just felt like giving up altogether?
No, I don't think that I could let myself think that far ahead to actually giving up. But I think I was just overwhelmed with having another child, and then just being aggravated with the whole situation of everything that we had done. And he progressed tons. And that's the thing too. It can get really guilt and shame filled, because you feel ungrateful or you recognize that you're being ungrateful, but it's kind of a normal part of it. It's okay, I think. And it's just name it and don't be ashamed of it. I was being ungrateful. I was like, he's not fully conversational. So you just have this internal wrestling with that.
It's easy to compare yourself to other people's journeys, because in these groups, everyone's sharing their videos, and Some kids might have the super quick recovery. That was my first child. And then my second child was this very slow. So when you're seeing, well, they recovered this fast and mine, I've been doing it longer and they're not recovered. So it is easy to kind of lose hope and faith that it's working. And that's why documentation is so important. So you can look back on videos or look back on journal entries and see, oh, this is where he was. Because it is easy to forget the day-to-day on the progress they're making. So to have those things to reference back kind of keeps you motivated and grateful for the progress that they have made.
Yeah, it is. And it's like you said, it's great to be able to look back and actually read where they were a year ago. And yeah, it's usually these fast recoveries are the exception, I think, to the rule. I mean, I think most of us have a long journey ahead of us. But I mean, I think I just got at this complacent place where I was just like, I can't deal with that right now. So I was doing maintenance things. We were probably trying to think what we were doing. We were still actually doing immune modulation, which is no joke. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. We're still doing that. And just kind of, but I just wasn't wanting to take in new information as much as I had been. I wasn't wanting
up on the diet and the supplements completely, or did you still kind of keep those?
No, I never gave up on the diet. And this is probably just my personality. But once I have invested that much into the diet, like, because you have to, this is the thing about the gluten-free diet and diet in general. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. So don't get mad at me and shoot the messenger. But you have to do it 100% of the time, 100% of the way, and for like years for you to get the full result.
Try gluten-free waffles for a week and say, oh, it's not working.
No,
months.
No, not even for months. Yeah. So you have to do that. I mean, some doctors will tell you 4 months. I've heard some say a year. So, and I believe a year is probably true. Are you going to see some progress along the way? Yeah, sure. Hopefully. But to get that fully out of their system and recover the damage that's been done, I think it can take a long time. And I didn't want to acknowledge that, but here we are. And I'd already gotten like 4 months into it. So no matter how complacent I got, I wasn't going to lose those 4 months that I already invested in doing this. I'm like, I already have worked my butt off to do this. I felt like I was working my butt off. Let me just say, in hindsight, gluten-free diet is so stinking easy. There is no reason to not do it.
I wish that was all that our kids needed was gluten-free.
Oh, I know. I know. It's so aggravating that there's more to it than gluten-free. Like, wish that was all there was. So we kept doing the diets. I just wasn't definitely wasn't very active in the groups, and I definitely wasn't reading much of anything. I was just kind of doing what we had started at that point. And then once I had my third son, I pretty much took that whole first year of just doing maintenance stuff, still doing the diet as we were. And the things that we had already started, we would keep rolling with. But I wasn't doing a whole lot of other new things or reading new things. I just kind of got burnout. And I think that happens. I think that's probably really common. I think that I'm fortunate that it was just a burnout and not a give up. And I think there's a really big difference in the two. And I hate the burnout period because you are losing time, but it's like you're only human. So you have to kind of step back if you need to. So I did. I took about that year of time off, but then I came back probably this summer. I came back like just with all these revelations of, okay, we've got to go out this big. My son is now 6 years old. And I'm not going to put an age limit on how long you have to get him recovered, but he's 6 years old and that scares me. And I'm like, it's now or never. And so what we decided is that we would pour all of as much finances as we could into him for the next few years. We haven't really set a date, but a few years, and just see how it goes of just giving everything to him. So we're actually going to, we have our house on the market right now. We're going to sell that. We're going to downsize, cash in on equity, and go full force at this. I think that I see this so much in our community. they come in, I know they don't have the money. Who has this much extra money laying around? Not many of us. And so they want to try to go without a doctor, but then you're just taking stabs in the dark of what could or could not be the problem. You're just basing it off of, oh, this is what helped Becky's son, and this is what helped Jennifer's son, and this is what, and you're just trying all these things, and you can't even distinguish if it's healing reaction or if they're really sick. I mean, it's just craziness, and you're going to wear yourself plumb out doing that. So, in my looking back on it, wisdom that I have learned over the years and where I feel like we are at now is it is better to just do this in a quality fashion of let's put the money into the testing and then the doctors, and because ultimately you're really wasting money doing it the other way. I mean, it may be cheaper to just buy this $20 this and try it for a few weeks, but that adds up. I mean, just look at my cabinet right now. I mean, I have probably $1,000 worth of little $20 trial and error things. And it's like, why not just invest that into testing and skip all of the ups and downs that can bring doing all this trial and errors?
And there is ways to do it affordably. And if you can't work with the doctor right off the bat, you can still start the diet and still implement a few supplements or vitamins and minerals that are known to help everybody. And you can save up to work with the doctor. Or there's tests that you can even order online without a doctor, so you can start building up your collection of lab work. So when you can see a doctor, you've already done all the lab work to present to them. It's not a huge expense all at once.
Yeah. I will say that with testing, something I've learned and didn't know at the beginning and wish I had known is that they want it to be within a year, or they're not really going to be able to base a lot of your...
That's a good point to make.
You know what I mean? So like doing a test online that you can order yourself is fine. Just make sure that it's in your 1-year plan to get to a doctor to help you interpret that. And there are definitely ways. And I would say, like, if you find the right doctor, my doctors have all been great about being really aware of the fact that they don't want to make you spend tons of money. Like, they're really smart about the tests that they choose to do. And they've shopped around and found the best deal that they can for the supplements that they want you to have. They give you things that you can get either from the pharmacy or through your insurance for testing. I got reimbursed on some of the Genova tests that I would have never dreamed that I would have got. I was pretty shocked because my insurance is awful to us. So,
really not. They don't cover a lot of this stuff anyway.
No, and so and you can file. You can send in your claims and try to get reimbursed for out-of-network stuff. So I don't mean that you have to spend millions on this, but I'm just saying for us, like, I'm done trying to do it on my own the cheapest way I can, because I've realized I was just kind of throwing money away at that point because I was just guessing and it just wasn't working for us. It wasn't. Some people really get lucky with that, though, and they find the thing on their own. But I just think if you're at a place where you're stuck, or, you just want to get really specific answers for your kid, I mean, I think and always the parent is in the lead. Like I said earlier, I can't emphasize that enough. Don't ever think that you are working for the doctor, or that you have to do everything your doctor says, or that you're limited to the doctor you started with. I mean, you can fire and hire them as you see fit. There's no pressure on that. Sometimes
it does take multiple different doctors, because different doctors use different protocols or specialize in different areas. And sometimes you'll work with one doctor until you're not seeing results anymore, and it's okay to move on and have a new team, which is kind of like what you guys ended up doing.
Yes. Yeah. So it's important to have a team, and sometimes you need more than one. And I know that's scary to people because you're talking about big money, but some of them specialize like in Lyme disease. I mean, if you have Lyme, you have got to get a Lyme specific doctor. No, don't care how good your MAPS doctor is, you're going to need a Lyme doctor to help you with that. And there are doctors, I think they all have their niches. Some of them are really great with PANS and PANDAS, and some of them are really good with methylation, and some of them are really great with genetics and herbals. And so it can be difficult to find one that can kind of do a little bit of everything. And it can mean that you might have to have two depending on your child's situation. Like if I found out that my child had Lyme, I would keep my MAPS doctor, but I would also have to have a Lyme specialist because Lyme's just really complicated.
Really, if you have a good doctor, they'll be open to you working with another.
Oh yeah, I think they are.
They don't know everything, and
yeah, that's probably a good sign of when you need to look for a new one, is if you have one that's just really pushing their protocol and it's not helping your child, and they're still, again, it goes back to they want to make it seem like it's your fault. You're not doing something right. You must not be complying, and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to tolerate that. Find someone else. My favorite has been working, and both the doctors I've worked with have been like this. They're open to anything that you bring to the table. So if you want to come to them and say, I saw this, other parents said that they use this. What are your thoughts on it? Doesn't mean that they're going to say, yes, I totally agree with that. Go and try it for everything. But at the end of the conversation, it should be, what do you feel is best for your child? You do what you feel. This is what I know about it. And ultimately they have to be okay with the fact that you're using it. You don't want a doctor that you feel like you have to hide that you're doing all these other things from.
That's the problem with that a lot of parents run into that are doing anti-cut chelation is so many MAPS doctors or biomedical doctors are so against it. And that's unfortunate because it does help a lot of kids. So I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me about our MAPS doctor as well, was he never made us feel like we didn't know anything or what we were doing was wrong. He very much embraced free thinking. And when we brought ideas to the table, if he didn't know something, he admitted it and said that he was going to look into it, and was very open to allowing us to make suggestions as well, which is important.
Yeah, it is. So I think those are signs for what to look for in doctors, that they're just going to let you be part of the team, that you are not made to feel like you're a subordinate or incompetent, that, that they're going to value what you have to say. Because, the thing is our communities are a valuable resource. I don't mean to make it seem like, and maybe I sounded that way earlier, that getting on there and reading what's helping other kids is bad. That's like the place where you can be like, oh, I've never heard of that before. I'm going to look into that. I'm going to ask my doctor what he thinks about it. I'm going to, you can look into it more, but it's not all bad, looking at what has helped other people. It's a great thing, because then you can bring that to your doctor and they may say, well, I've not really heard a lot about that. Let me get into it and research it and see what I can find. And, because those research papers, we have a lot of those posted in our groups.
Conclusion.
I'm like, I try.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, the abstract and the conclusion. Yeah. So that's about all you can really digest. So it's really great if you have a doctor who's willing to go and look at that for you and help you interpret some of those things, that maybe it's not that we're unintelligent, it's that we are not as educated in this as them. So it's good to have a doctor that recognizes that. It can be like,
also, like in the same breath, don't be doctor dependent either. Don't expect just because you're working with the doctor that they're going to do everything for your child. And when it's not working, you're going to blame them. Because really, if you're not understanding why you're doing the protocol, how are you even going to know what symptoms to look for or have the faith that it's going to work? Because I do think a lot of success does boil down to a parent's mindset about it too.
Yes.
So definitely be just as involved as the doctor. Don't just depend on them doing everything for you.
Absolutely.